Right, welcome to today's session. Bring my PowerPoint over here. Today we are covering scheduling tasks and calendar appointments in ARM. So there's a variety of tasks we can create with ARM tied into the components of your trials, and that all of those tasks create a calendar both within the ARM system, and there's an option to send those into your own Outlook calendar as well. So we will kind of show both sides of that coin. Just to point out a couple upcoming webinars that we have coming soon. And as always, if you aren't subscribed to our Product Pulse newsletter, that's a great way to get updated on ARM program updates. We try to send out a newsletter shortly after each release so you can see what new features are in there. Draw some highlights to, hey, did you know, for features that are already in there but end up being hidden, things like that. And of course, we use that list to notify people of these webinars too. And if you have any new people on board for this research season, we have the ARM beginner certification. That's a great way to get people onboarded and familiar with ARM if they're brand new to the software. It's just about 2 hours worth of watching videos, and they walk you through the very basics of ARM software. Then you get a certificate at the end. If you're in the university and you have a graduate student, they actually can earn a free 2-year license by completing that certification as well. And that is all found on our ARM Academy that has primarily the beginner videos, but also some other courses. You can learn about the tablet data collector or the ST add-ons and things like that. All right, with that, let's dive into today's topic, which is the scheduling tasks. And I'm really going to just dive right in here to ARM. I don't have a lot of theory on this one, but more just showing what we have and what you can do here in ARM. So I have a protocol open and just kind of want a real quick show what it's about. It's our typical example we give. Just a few herbicide products that are going to be applied at 2 different times. If you did our spray seeding plan webinar, you may recognize this as well. We're actually going to only make 2 applications, like we're going to go out to apply products twice, but just because of the difference in equipment, we actually use 2 different application codes for the same time. So A and B will actually be the same time, but we use 2 different codes, and then same thing for C and D. And then just looking at our planned assessments. Here, we just have a stand count, percent control. I just kind of have some examples here, and then it looks like a yield. The key that I want to point out here, not so much the actual assessment itself, but the rating timing. That will be important when we use the schedule tasks. So we'll probably be back here shortly once we show that to see just how that plays a role. But that's basically kind of what we have here as far as your typical protocol setup. Certainly you can do pretty much everything that we're showing is the same in a trial. So if you already have trial files created, you can do this very same process. I'm kind of demonstrating it in a protocol because I think that highlights a usefulness of this feature, that you can create a schedule. And if you do that in the protocol, then all of the trials, the different locations that you might be running for that, all inherit that same schedule. So that can really cut down on the work of filling in the schedule itself, because it'll be implemented across all those trials from the get-go. So with that, we will move to the Schedule Tasks editor. It's just another section either on your navigation bar, or if you're a menu addict, it's under the trial map option, which is grayed out because I'm in a protocol, but it's here on the window menu here to do the schedule tasks. So this is the editor for creating and filling out these tasks. Basically, a calendar item of what needs to be done as part of that trial. So we can certainly kind of manually fill this in on this editor. Kind of the main portion on the bottom is a table, and that would be the list of tasks you have created. And then each column is, a component and details of that task. The top half here is kind of an interface version of that table. So instead of just typing into the table down here, you have a little bit more of an interface to fill in whichever row in the table is highlighted in blue. That's the one that you've selected, and that's the one you're describing. So if I just click on a type to define a treatment application task, you can see now this table will update as I start to type information in. And then just to create a new one or edit a different one, you would just click on another row and you can start filling in and creating more tasks. So that's useful if you kind of know what you want to do to start just creating tasks that you want. I think maybe a kind of a pro tip here for you that might make it a little easier to really get started with the editor would actually be to use under the Tools menu, there's an option to build tasks. So this is a way ARM can kind of help you and speed up the process so you don't have to manually add every task that you might need. So when I click on Build Tasks, we'll see what happens. ARM is going to create a list of tasks for us. Here, let me close my study rules here. So you can see ARM has created 7 tasks, and those are based on every application code that I have in the study. It created a task for each of those individual applications for me. And then it also created a task for each assessment timing that we had. So again, we'll see that in a moment, but the A1, A2, and A3, since we had those 3 unique rating timings in that editor, then that was how ARM knew there's 3 different assessment events that need to take place. And that's really the tying there, just like application code. I think that's a little more easier to latch onto because that's already part of ARM, that's a unit that gets used to link application details with a treatment component. We're kind of trying to do the same thing with these assessments. Here, if I click into here, you can see the assessment is linked to a rating timing, call it a code. It's equivalent to an application code, but it's an assessment code, essentially. And that is just an arbitrary numbering system to get a sense for how many times you'll be going out to the field to take assessments. And it could be 1 or more assessments as well. So question here before we get too far. The best place to create a task either at the protocol or the trial. So I would say there may be kind of pros and cons to both, to be honest. I think once we get all done, you'll kind of see the whole gamut of the options. And maybe we'll come back to that question as well to kind of recap because it's a good one. But the key point I would say is in a protocol, of course, creating these tasks then will allow every trial to have this schedule available to be used. So that can be really powerful to do. If it's too late for that, or if you're just a trialist that receives a trial from a sponsor, everything is still in play for filling this in your own trial. You can definitely take advantage of it. But I think there's an efficiency gain if you're a company doing the research to have it in the protocol so it travels into the trials. But great question. All right, so we have our scheduled tasks that have been built. And just once more to show that that was on the tools menu to be able to build tasks. That's really just going to have ARM look at the study in question and create all of the appropriate application events and assessment events based on what is in the trial or the protocol at this point in time. So it gives us a starting point. I would not say that these tasks are complete yet. The biggest importance still here would be to denote the timing. When does this actually need to occur? So basically the build task gives us a nice to-do list. All right, we've got some tasks planned out. I kind of know the roadmap of what should be happening. And now let's tell ARM when these events should take place. So clicking on this first application A task, again, you can see that that has been chosen for us. It's a treatment application. This list shows us all of the different application codes that we have in the study. The second option here to fill in is the timing. So if we're in a trial and we know that application A is scheduled to occur next Thursday, whatever it is, you have this particular date that for sure is when this is going to occur, then we can fill in a date. And you can see that puts this in the timing. We have options to specify a deviation, if you will. So, okay, the plan is next Thursday, but if you look at the forecast and say, oh, we're probably going to be rained out, maybe it's all right if you have to do it on that Friday or that Wednesday instead, or maybe it can't occur at before Thursday, but you could get in a couple days late if you needed to. That's where this timing deviation is defining the really when's an acceptable time for this to occur. And certainly if you don't have that information, you can always leave them blank too. We're kind of just walking through the different options that are available, not that every single thing would need to be utilized in this task editor either. Moving to the description, this was filled in for us, so there's not a whole lot of information at the moment, but you can certainly adjust that. And this description is used kind of as the main title for your task, especially if you're exporting that to Outlook. That can be advantageous to put a nice, simple but informative description there, because that's kind of the main heading you'll see when you look at what is this event, what is this task to do. So it could simply be, application A. Maybe you want to include the trial ID. I'm just going to call this webinar 123 as our trial ID, and then application A. You certainly could put in details from the application if it's a Foley or whatever might matter to you for kind of reminding yourself what has to happen. That description is just free text to write in whatever would matter, essentially. But I did include the trial ID because we'll see later on that we can view a calendar actually across multiple trials or multiple protocols. So that can be helpful as well. Here, since we're in the protocol, we might not have a specific trial ID, so maybe we wouldn't fill that in just yet. Or if we have kind of an overall project ID, that would at least be a start. Again, you really have a lot of flexibility in that description just to write what you want to see. So there you can see the description is updating as we fill this in. Moving on to some other options. Again, I think these are maybe a little less used, but definitely an option if you'd like to take advantage of it. The assigned to, this is a list of people that correspond to, I don't think I'll have the field yet here in the protocol. There is a applied by field, and also in the assessment data, there is an assessed by list. Yep, we do have that one. So that is where we're getting that list. It's actually the same personal list on your computer for both of those sections. So whether you're talking about an application or an assessment, you can build a list of those technicians and people involved with your research. So if you want to have, designate who that task might be assigned to, that's really where that list is filled. So maybe if I want to add myself, I can type myself in here and view the list and put me in this list as well. So now I'll have 2 items in my list here. And as a result, now back on our scheduled tasks, my assigned to list will grow, and here I can select, in this case, myself, for the person who will have this task assigned to them. Now this naming here is just a name within ARM. It's just a list on my computer. There's no connection to different Outlook calendars. We'll see that later on. We'll talk about some options, but this is just strictly a string of text, a name that you put into your list here, that we can later on view. When we view our calendar, we can filter by the different names, so the different people who might be sitting down to use ARM at this computer would be able to see. But that's kind of the extent of that functionality. Finally, we have a duration, just to denote, how much time that this task could take. Again, thinking about a calendar, it can have a certain number of hours that it would take up of your day if you want to kind of schedule it that way, or if you just leave it at 1, at least it's just an item for the day, and you don't have to be too specific then. So we don't really have a time of day. You'll notice that these are necessarily assigned to. So you wouldn't say from here that it's going to occur on that Thursday at 10 a.m. You'll notice we don't really have that marked down here. So sometimes that duration is not quite as important, but could be useful for just estimating at this point in time. Yeah, this is going to be a long application, so I'm going to guess it's going to take 2 hours or whatever. You have that ability if you'd like. And then you can also have a repeating task. So if this should occur across multiple days for whatever reason, maybe more of an assessment or some other type, but if it is something that's going to happen multiple days in a row, you can have that repeat by turning on the multiple days and then saying how many days it should repeat. So this would create 3 days of the same task starting on the 7th. It'll actually go 7, 8, 9 on the calendar. So as you can see, we've kind of filled this in up above, but the table down below has been following along with us. So that really are the different components for an application or for a task. Here we kind of walk through an application. I'm going to skip down to an assessment just to talk through a few of the other options available here on the tasks. And really, I would say the number one utility, the true functionality that you're unlocking with the scheduled tasks, I think one of the biggest ones is this interval for the timing. So, at this point of time, as we're writing a protocol, it's unlikely that we have a true date for anything to occur. Most definitely assessments a lot of times are going to depend on when the application occurs, or maybe it's going to depend on the growth stage of our crop or our pest or something like that. And so at the outset of the trial, there's no way you would be able to just look at a calendar and pick a day. Maybe you'll have an idea of when it would occur, but then all it would take is, like we said, the application taking a day longer or sooner, or something happens and it changes those dates. And now suddenly your whole calendar is off. What we can do in ARM is tell ARM how to calculate when that would occur. So we can set an interval as the timing of our assessment in this case. So maybe in our example, I will have the first assessment occur 7 days after application A will occur. So as a result, we can see that there's a calculation that means it'll be planned for April 14th. The nice thing is this is relative to application A. So if there's a change to the scheduling, say, oh, well, you know what, there's no way, the planting had to be pushed back because of the weather or whatever. So we're not going to have, we're not going to be ready for that application yet on the 7th. It's going to be pushed back to probably on Monday. If you change the timing of that application, then let me see if I can get my thing to refresh here. It's not refreshing. Then that April 11th will then carry down to our assessment. So then this should occur 7 days after the 11th instead of the 7th. So there's a lot of flexibility then, instead of having to manually go into every single task now and push everything back 4 days. That would be a huge pain. It will go automatically. And I don't know if I need to leave and come back to this editor to get it to refresh. There we go. Probably pressing the save button might have refreshed it as well. So here now I've got the planned date for application A to refresh into April 11th. And then that triggered our interval for assessment A1 was automatically adjusted then. It's supposed to be 7 days after application A is planned. So now it's been updated automatically to the 18th. So that interval timing here has a great power to be able to adjust to the natural variation in when things are able to occur. From the protocol standpoint as well, we're here in the protocol, it's also beneficial because even if everything goes perfectly according to plan in all of the trials, maybe each trial is going to be off by a couple of days. You're not going to have the exact same dates throughout. So it'd be the same thing. Putting this in the protocol, you can explain the timing of when these things should occur without hard coding a date that is liable to change or not be accurate, just depending on which trial is being performed and when it's performed. So that interval here is very important. And in this case, we had it relative to an application. Maybe our treatment application would have an interval relative to a crop emergence date or a planting date. So we have other dates, other components of your trials that we can link to. So if we choose the crop emergence date, this drop down here is the list of crops that we have in our trial or our protocol. And here, I don't know if I have just an empty crop description at the moment. Nope, it's probably waiting for the trial. Certainly, if we had more than one crop, we could select different ones, but it'll be tied in with the information that's filled in for the crop. we're in a protocol. So we'll see later, we'll go into a trial to kind of see it live. But something like the interval for the date then right now, so let's just say it's 21 days after emergence for whatever reason. This will, again, it'll wait to know the planned date until when we're in the trial and our crop number 1 has an emergence date entered. Then we'll be able to calculate 21 days after that emergence and then be able to put in a planned date. So that interval might not immediately flesh out a bunch of tasks throughout your calendar. It might be kind of a sleeper cell, if you will, waiting until things start to actually happen. So I'll try to show that here. So we're in the protocol. We'll kind of finish up the different components, and then we'll generate a trial and start putting in dates so we can actually see this thing begin to grow and live like it will as trials are being unfolding throughout the season. So looking at the other components, I think we covered most items. We'll have the completed, there's a completed checkbox. Of course, that's once we get into the trial to say that this task has actually occurred. So you wouldn't ever fill that in a trial. Maybe just a couple of other examples. Application C, going back to our protocol setup, in theory, A and B really should be the same timing, but we'll just keep them separate for example's sake. But both C and D should occur on the same day. And perhaps application C should have an interval of 1 week after application A. And then the same thing for D, we'll just put an interval of 7 days after. We could keep it as A, or we could do B, since B and D were kind of paired just from the way that they were performed. They're linked to the same treatments, but it's the same, basically the same difference. So maybe I'll pick A here just to, just to be consistent that C and D are both the same timing. And we could update the description if we want. We'll just maybe make this our trial ID, application B. Etc. You can kind of match. And maybe just a few more interval examples while we're at it. Maybe it's just 10 days after the planting date. That probably doesn't make any sense. Let's do 60 days after the planting date, just so we can see that linkage as well. And then maybe this interval here would be, in theory, after A1. That's one question that I get sometimes is, can I have an assessment be relative to another assessment? And it's just a little challenging from a programming standpoint, since that rating timing is a little flexible. You can have multiple columns with the rating timing, and the dates then could kind of make a mess. So it's a little hard to lock that, have that be kind of a guaranteed lockdown. There's only one date for a rating timing type of situation. And so we don't have we don't have the rating timing as an option for the interval. So what I tell people is, let's say, for example, we want A3 to occur 2 weeks after A1 occurred. I typically say, well, then let's look at the timing for A1 and calculate the timing for A3 relative to that. So in our case then, A1 happens 7 days after application A. So if we want A3 to happen 14 days after that, then we could fill in an interval of 21 days after application A. And that would achieve the same thing as saying the interval was 14 days after A1. So that's kind of the workaround to do that. Piggyback on what the timing is for that other assessment and build that into the timing for the later assessment that occurs. Real quick, just to show that rating timing once more, then the assessment data, each assessment column that you have planned out has a rating timing field. And that's just kind of an arbitrary schedule for how many, when you're going out to take assessments. And in our case, I had just one column for each rating timing, but there's no reason that that would have to be the case. So for example, A3, it looks like we're taking the raw grain weight. Maybe I also have a moisture assessment that would occur at the same time. So I could fill in all of this details and actually be a useful column, but for the moment, just to demonstrate that the rating timing, then I can have more than one column linked to that timing to say both of these assessments are going to be recorded on the same day at the same timing. And that's just fine to have. Much like for an application code, you can have more than one treatment be linked to that code. It's kind of the same thing here, just a little bit different interface of how that is done. I'm just noticing here my description. So my example is old. If any of you were on our previous webinar with the AR mobile preparations and talking about SEs, it turns out that the description row here is actually intended to be a crop description, not a general description of the assessment. So I'm training myself. I've been training people wrong for a while and steering people wrong. So you can see even all my examples have that description filled in, but you want to use the SE description. Even if you're not using an SE file, and we won't dive into any of that, but that really just means the assessment description. So that's a better place to put that human readable description of what the assessment is, and that SE description. I could do that for all my columns, but we'll just circle back here. All right, so I think we covered all the components to a task itself and what you can do with the task. Now, we also have a calendar editor here within ARM in that same list of editors. Let me move this over just a little bit. So this will draw a calendar, just like you may be familiar in email, whether it's Outlook or a Google Calendar. Just a simple calendar with those individual tasks on it visualized. And so if you want to know more about this one, you can double click on that task and it will bring up that little interface for the components of that task. So this is our application A that we had hard coded to be on April 11th. And as a result, then we have application C and D. We're going to occur 7 days after that, same as this assessment A1 that was going to occur. And that parentheses there is our trial ID. So even if we didn't type that in there, you could see the trial ID within ARM at least. So a couple of them, a couple of these are on today's day, and that's because we didn't have a timing calculated yet. So these were not able to determine when they should happen just yet. but we do have the interval defined. So in this case, it's relative to the crop emergence. So we'll see real soon when we create a trial that these will eventually become populated with the correct date. Same thing here, a planting date. We don't have that information in a protocol yet. Once we're in a trial now, we can fill in those details of the crop because we're actually talking about something that has occurred or is currently occurring, and then we'll be able to generate what I would call real dates for those assessments. And there's our last assessment, A3. That was 2 weeks after our assessment A1. So that's why that is on the calendar in the right place. So I would say this is not uncommon when you first start with your assessment or with your tasks as you fill them out to see a certain number of them just kind of sitting there on the day that we are in right now. And those basically we want to still create the task so it exists, but we just aren't able to calculate when it's going to occur just yet. So don't be alarmed if you have a bunch of them like that. That's kind of a byproduct of the interval, and they'll be adjusted automatically when the trial starts to be filled in. So with that, let's go ahead and create a trial. And here I've got the trial location filled in for this example. I'll just click on create trial as our made up trial ID for that one. And I guess we can save those changes to the protocol and create our own trial. Not too worried about the randomization right now, so that one looks good. Just leave that to my computer while we work on it. So now we are in a trial. And we can see if we go to our schedule tasks, as advertised, that whole list here is available in our trial as well. And same thing with the calendar, then we can visualize when those will occur. With that list there on today's date being those ones that are relative to others. So a couple of our examples where we don't yet have that planned date, we can see how that will get filled in as soon as it's available. So we have both the one relative to the emergence date and one relative to the planting date. So when you're working on this trial, just like you normally do, the scheduled tasks will be behind the scenes, paying attention to changes to dates. So in our case, let me turn on all of my fields. So planting, let's see the planting date. So as soon as this is documented, okay, the planting date, in our case, I'll just make it, that was last Monday, is when that occurred. Then the emergence date was just yesterday. We'll just put some dates down just to have something for those tasks to go off of. So just by filling in that information, you can see that our tasks have updated automatically. So now application B was going to be 21 days after our emergence date. So it automatically figured out that it should occur on April 18th. Same thing for A2. Now the planting date, 60 days after planting date is when that second set of assessments should occur. Now that is on May 20th. And the calendar also is updated automatically. So we can see those different items just updated, just as part of as you're working on, not sure what this Lone Ranger here is. Let's go back to that scheduled task. He's hanging out here. I'm not sure what we must have clicked away from that and didn't have that A3 filled in quite like we wanted to, but that's okay. So the interval, again, those will update just as the trial is filled in. There's also the linkage, not just to those planting dates, but when things occur. For example, the application itself. If I go into our application tab, and we actually perform the application, and we fill in all the details for the weather and the equipment and all that occurred. Let's say the ended up being the 8th. Didn't quite get there on Thursday. Had to push it back one day. Filling in the application date is going to refresh our tasks. So two things, it's going to mark it as completed and put in that date. So we can see it was done on the 8th. It looks like I was off a week. We had said it was originally planned for the 11th. So let me go back just to have a coherent example. We had planned for it to occur on the 11th. And let's say it ended up being one day late. So that would be the 12th. So filling in that application date updates our task to say that has been completed. I don't have to mark it complete myself. ARM knows that it has been done since I filled in the application date. So now we can see it occurred on the 12th. The nice thing is it's also updated the rest of our schedule for this trial. So for example, application C, we had to wait a week before getting out and performing application C. Well, now that we were delayed a day with our first application, C is now adjusted. It's one day later now. We're on the 19th instead. So as things change, as dates get moved around, there's no manual adjusting of the calendar. ARM will do that for you. We now know it's got to be on the 19th instead, and all of these dates will just continue to adjust and move on that calendar as things are filled in. So now it's going to be that 19th, that Tuesday is when those will be scheduled. And that 20th, that stays the same because that was based on the planting date, which is not going to move around on us. So really, I would say it's kind of a set it and forget it, hopefully, is the approach once you've worked with these tasks a little bit. That you flesh out the schedule. You can put in your description to be that nice heading for you on your calendar to remind you what needs to happen. And then the rest will just kind of happen for you as you're working on your trial. Same thing for the assessments. Let's just show that assessment A1. It's the same thing when you take data. Oh, my screen is stuck. That's no good. Every so often that seems to happen. I think it's I have a smaller screen for webinars to make the recording more, a little bit better aspect ratio than my large monitor. And it looks like something is not happy. But a great question here while I reset my ARM. Good thing we saved that trial. The tasks can occur on your Outlook calendar. That is exactly right. So, so far, I've just been working within ARM to create those tasks. As soon as I get logged in, I will show you a button that you must press to have ARM send all of those tasks that we have on that calendar for the trial. We send those tasks to Outlook. So if you're using Outlook and it's running on your computer, then ARM can communicate with Outlook to create those tasks on your calendar. It's going very slow for me here. Kind of risking it by even clicking into the assessment data. It did work real quickly since it's not freaking out. That rating timing A1, as soon as you put in a rating date, let's say we're taking the assessment today and we put in our data, then we'll see that the scheduled task, just like the application did, it will be marked as complete with that date that's linked to the A1. So back to the Outlook. So all of these items on our calendar here just within ARM, we can send out to Outlook. And to do that, on your properties panel at the right, there is a button here to create appointments. And that will have ARM send and create all of these tasks into your Outlook. And then those tasks actually can sync. So there's a little bit of communication that can occur between Outlook and ARM. It's a little bit limited. I don't think you can like adjust descriptions and things like that. But if in Outlook you move a planned assessment or planned application, then the next time you open your ARM and open that trial, ARM will kind of communicate back to Outlook and see if there was any changes to that task. And so it can actually update the planned date here. You know, our example of our treatment application where we just picked a date. If you move that around, ARM can become aware of that movement in Outlook as well. So the key is it's not automatic. I don't have 7 tasks in my Outlook calendar right this moment. But they will be created if I come over here and press create appointments. And you would do that for each of your trials. There are some options here. You do not need to fill them in. And in fact, I think it can be a little confusing. Currently, ARM can communicate with the default calendar for the default profile. If you've worked with kind of setting up Outlook, you can have more than one email account linked in Outlook. But really, ARM is going to communicate with the default address that is configured. If you do have, some groups have like a shared calendar that they've created, and really nice to be able to have kind of everyone that's in the office be able to look to see the schedule without having to have each individual person create appointments. So that's a situation that can kind of helpful to connect this schedule up to. If you're kind of in that boat, just contact us and I can kind of step you through. There's a couple of options that you really kind of have to dive into the inner workings of Outlook and how some of those email accounts are set up. But it's pretty straightforward as long as you have permissions to edit those. A couple of the groups I've worked with, their IT has that kind of locked down. So we'd have to go through IT to get it set up. So a little bit quirky, just the way Microsoft has things set up, but it is possible. The simplest is just hit create appointments and it'll be on your calendar. But there are some options if you want to get kind of high tech, fancy with how that's shared. We can help you set that up. One more thing to highlight. That's where my scroll bar went. So we had looked at the calendar. And that was a nice visualization of the tasks in this trial. There is also a master calendar. So this is the exact same thing, except it's showing all of the tasks in all of your trials and protocols, potentially. And so the way it does that is it looks at your study list. Here it's going to close my trial. So yeah, I'll say sure. It looks at the study list. If you're not familiar with the study list, that's the screen that comes up when you first open ARM if you aren't opening a file up. And it's really just kind of a running total of the different protocols and trials that you've opened, you've created, things like that. And so across all of those studies that you've worked on, then this master calendar will show all of the tasks for those studies. There is a rebuild option here in the study list. So you can actually direct ARM and say all of the files in this particular folder or this set of folders should be the ones I want you to look at. So that can be useful if you have, if you're kind of a manager level overseeing a lot of people maybe working on trials and you want to see, where we're at this week, what all has to happen. That master calendar can be really helpful. Just to go out to your company's network or Dropbox folder, build your list so you have everyone's trials in your study list, and then the master calendar will give a nice overview of what's happening. And there's some filtering here on the right so you can control what you're looking at. So right now there's no filtering at all. We're seeing everything, but you could certainly say, all right, well, let's focus in what applications are going to happen this week, or what assessments need to occur. You can filter on the different properties of those tasks. Same thing for that assigned to. So which tasks are linked to me? Which tasks here, none of the other ones were assigned, so they're all blank. But if you were using that assigned to field, you can filter and see just what applies to a particular person. You can view or not view completed tasks. We saw that as things are filled in, it might be nice to start limiting the list of what's occurring because it's already been marked as completed. Here's where you can control protocols, trials, or everything. Since I'm in I had a protocol open first, I think that's probably why it's filtered there, but it's going to be kind of a duplicate anyway. There's all the trials that were in my list. So it looks like there's some other tasks in some of those other trials as well to look at. And then finally, the last option here is a color code. So these are colored right now by type. So the green were the assessments and the yellow were the applications. But you could color by who it was assigned to, color by the trial location. So each individual trial that these tasks are coming from would have their own colors. So a nice interface when you're really wanting to look at the tasks related to ARM. But of course, being able to export out to Outlook, so that way it's kind of in the rest of what's happening to you throughout the week is a nice functionality as well. And then all of those items will be in Outlook, and you can do kind of some similar things. I think the master calendar has some other options. You can't quite control all of this filtering necessarily in Outlook. So you might end up using both tools, just depending on what you need to look at and figure out. Last but not least, there is a print button. There is a report kind of related to these tasks. So if I just go to a single trial here, there's a print button, and that's kind of a shortcut to the report. If I go into print reports, there is a schedule report. So this allows you to focus in on a particular date range and see all of the tasks that are defined. So here, this will tell you, and you certainly can do a batch across all your trials. So you can have multiple trial IDs here and see then the different tasks that are going to happen. So if you need a paper trail, kind of like that overall view of what's upcoming, that's another option to generate that. That's about it for the scheduled tasks. I guess I think one more kind of best practice tip to maybe get started with this a bit, kind of along the same lines as that protocol or trial. Where should I put these? You can fill in the schedule for a trial, and maybe you have multiple trials that kind of fit that same schedule. You know, all of our herbicides have that same pattern of 7, 14, 21 days after application, et cetera. You can utilize the merge. So this merge tool is really, it's really a powerful copy if you haven't used it before. And when you choose to merge from another study, basically whatever file you have open right now, we can go out and pick another file of that type. So trial to trial or protocol to protocol. We can find another one that has information that we want to copy into the trial or protocol we have open right now. I'm not sure what I have in this one, but I'm just going to select it just for an example's sake. And the key here I want to point out is part of what you can copy over are the scheduled tasks. So you are able to fill in that list for a trial or for a protocol, and then easily duplicate that into the next trial that you have by just utilizing that merge. And it'll copy that information into the current trial, and then you can always adjust it if there's some small changes. But just one other trick to kind of help replicate that information, if you will, and save a little time. So, all right, well, that is the end of our hour. If you have any questions, I can hang on the line here for a couple of minutes, but don't want to hold anyone hostage. So really appreciate you all joining us for this session, and hopefully we'll see you at another one here soon. Yeah, so your question about Outlook, my calendar is kind of messy, so I usually don't demonstrate that in the webinar, but when you export, oh, I already stopped sharing here, let me share my screen again. When you do the create appointments, that will put those items on your calendar just like you see in ARM. Then if you make a change to like the date of it, so here maybe I'll just drag this and say in Outlook, I'm going to move that back one day. Then if you do that in your Outlook, the next time you close, you'll want to close and reopen ARM. So ARM, kind of communicates with Outlook again when you open that trial. But yeah, when you open that trial, ARM will communicate with Outlook to see that that task has been changed, and it will update within the trial. So you are able to have that. I'm not certain about things like the description. I'd have to try that out. I'm not sure if everything, any change you make necessarily will come back, but for sure, the date assignment definitely will be updated, and maybe the description can change if you were to add more information in Outlook, but I'm not totally certain about that. But good question. Thanks.
Hi, Matt. Are you there?
Yes.
Yeah, I got disconnected the last time. So I would like your help at one point in time to schedule, well, basically to use this optional setting for the calendars. I'm really struggling with the calendars in my computer, and I cannot use my default. Otherwise, it's hard to share with the group. So if you could send me your email, and then we schedule a time that we can talk and you walk me through the process.
Yeah, definitely. Let me bring up the chat, and I will just drop my email address right there.
Okay.
Yeah, just let me know. We can schedule the time. That works best. Just kind of troubleshoot that communication between ARM and Outlook to see what might be going wrong. So.
And the other question I had is how do I make sure that when I'm updating the calendar, ARM is actually deleting, it's not duplicating my tasks, because this is the problem I had before. Like I plan for something and then it's raining and I have to postpone for a few days. And then I update and I had the impression that I was creating 2 sets of tasks. And it was really a nightmare indecision to figure out which one was the right one and going back and deleting everything. So how do I know if ARM is actually deleting and then recreating a new one?
Yeah, I would say the best practice maybe would be to not delete the task, but maybe move it. So like here on the calendar, I'll just show it on within the ARM calendar, but I think you can do something similar in Outlook where you could move an item. Maybe it needs to happen, like you said, a day later. If you move it, then the link, there's some sort of internal, identifier between that Outlook task and ARM task, so ARM knows that's still the same task. And I think that would be the best way to do that. Otherwise, deleting, then I could see sometimes ARM might not know, okay, that task gone. Okay, I need to create a new one. And there could be some confusion there. But if you always just keep the original ones and move them to the correct date, I think it might behave a little normal.
But how do I make ARM communicate? Because the only way I know is to create appointments. That's how I force ARM to communicate with Outlook. But once it's created, I don't have any, like, at least that I know, any update task, like just update and move things around. Is that right?
So once you create the appointments, then when ARM opens again, ARM
Oh,
can communicate with Outlook. So it'll see that, oh, you have changed the date of this task since I last
oh,
opened. And then it can update to know that that's actually now a day later than it was.
I see. So probably the issue I was having is that it wasn't recognizing the calendar name, and it was always showing me like a series of errors,
Okay.
and I have to just cancel, and after 3 times it would allow me to open the file. And that's perhaps why I wasn't seeing that.
Yeah, that would make sense. Those errors was ARM trying to talk with Outlook to
Yeah,
find those tasks and couldn't.
yes.
That would make sense.
Yeah, and then eventually I had to delete the profile and password name just so I could work better, right? And then that's why I never saw this communication going back and forth. Okay.
Right. Mhm.
All right. I'll shoot you an email and then we'll see. I will definitely need the IT folks to be on that call
Mhm.
because they always have a new a new set of tricks that I say, oh, come on,
Right.
it's too hard.
Mhm.
All right.
Sounds good.
I appreciate the webinar. It was great.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank
We'll
you.
talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.